All right, everybody, let's get started with our interview tonight. We have got two awesome guests on the program, which is it's an honor to have them both here. Our first guest is Miguel Mendonca. How do you pronounce that, Miguel?
It's Mendonca.
Mendonca. Okay. Miguel Mendonca is an Anglo-Azorian writer based in Bristol, England. He gained an honors degree in geography and history and studied social science and the environmental ethics at a postgraduate level. Miguel studied and worked in the sustainability field for 10 years, becoming an authority on renewable energy. While serving as a research manager for an international NGO, he wrote textbooks, book chapters, articles, papers, and studies, providing an evidence base for campaigners around the world to push for better renewable energy laws in their jurisdictions. He lectured internationally and worked with campaigners from NGOs, politics, finance, industry, and civil society on coalition building and strategy. His work contributed to the introduction of new laws in several countries and states. Miguel now writes fiction and nonfiction on ufology, politics, relationships, spirituality, and consciousness. Miguel, good evening. Welcome to Fringe Radio, and thank you for being here tonight.
Well, it's good to be with you, Pat. Thank you very much.
We also, this is going to be a really, really good show tonight. Miguel, of course, is on the other side of the world, but more local in our country. We have Vanessa LaMorte on the phone as well. Vanessa, good evening to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Vanessa is a mystologist, a guide and teacher with expertise of the mysteries. She holds a Master of Arts in Transpersonal Psychology and is a Reiki Master teacher, a sound healer, and a channel. Again, it's an honor to have you both on the program. Miguel, the reason, of course, we got in touch with each other was with your new book that you and Barbara Lamb finished up just recently called Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. What took you from doing the type of work you do to moving into a subject of this type?
Well, it had always been an interest of mine my whole life. Then my circumstances shifted and I decided I was not going to be doing environmental work any longer, and I started writing fiction, and in the research for that I got drawn back into the UFO fields after having a sighting over the Azorian Islands which are in the mid-Atlantic in 2009, and from there I started to become acquainted with the idea of hybrids, particularly through Barbara Lamb's work, and because I wanted to be respectful of the lived experience of hybrids, because Barbara in her lecture had said that she is acquainted with some, I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. I'll just call Barbara, see, would she talk to me a little bit about her understanding of the subject and possibly introduce me to some hybrids so that I could hopefully get them to take a look at, what I was writing and see, did it make any sense to them? But the first conversation I had with Barbara, she told me that there's already a group of hybrids getting together with other experiences through something called the IHCI, the Institute for Human Cosmic Interaction, and that they were looking at how they could raise awareness of this subject globally. And I must have spent all night processing, because the next morning I got up and I wrote 8 pages of notes on everything that just percolated overnight, and I turned that into a discussion paper, which I then discussed with Barbara, and it was really it was kind of a strategy document. Some of it was on safeguarding, kind of pros and cons, how one might go about bringing this out into the public domain more widely. And one of the things that really I was just particularly concerned with is that the hybrids themselves should have their own voice, that they should be able to speak their truth, tell their story in their way. And rather than having sort of documentary makers swoop in, and we've all seen the kind of hatchet jobs that are done on the subject of ufology in general.
Exactly.
And I didn't want to see the wrong kind of people break this news to the rest of the world. And in the end, I felt like Barbara and I might be the people to help that to happen. So because I'm a writer, I said, well, that's part of my skill set. I can help to pull that together. Barbara had the connections, and she knew Cynthia, Juju, Jacqueline from the book. Then Mary Rodwell connected me to Charmaine in England. Cynthia connected me to Matt. And we just started to meet more and more of the hybrids, and we settled on 8 people in the end, 5 from the United States, 3 from England, 6 women, 2 guys. And yeah, we spent about, I guess the interviews took about 2 months, something like that. And then, we spent a great deal of time going back and forth. I edited the book, so I made sure that all the hybrids got their transcripts back so that they could edit those and be represented as accurately as possible. And so far, the response to the book has been fantastic. The reviews that we've seen, the feedback that some of the hybrids themselves have had, have been really encouraging, and tells us that at the very least we achieved what we set out to do, that these guys have been given the opportunity to share their stories, their experiences, their understandings, and Vanessa will tell you all about how that was all taken to the next level at the International UFO Congress just last week.
Well, and I think on all of these subjects, Miguel and Vanessa, credibility is such a key importance, if you will. We're talking about, I guess you could label this under X-File type subjects, fringy type subjects. But Barbara, with her credibility and all the years and the research and the time and effort that she's put into this field of ufology in general, and on this type of subject, people need to be educated. When I talked to a longtime listener of the program the other day and was telling her about this interview that I was going to do this weekend, she brought up a really good point. She said, on planet Earth, on our planet, we've got, 6.5, 6.8, maybe close to 7 billion individuals. And who's to say in that, in that group of 7 billion people, we're all from the same place. We're all from this planet. It's definitely eye-opening, mind-blowing to some degree when you think those kind of numbers. They're absolutely staggering. But again, who's to say that everybody is from here? And there can't be people from other places, other times, other dimensions, what have you. It is a very interesting subject. Again, people are being more open-minded more and more, and for you guys and all the people that you work with to put this together, very interesting and very eye-opening, and again adds the with the credibility you all bring. You produced a document, a book that has substance to it.
Well, I'd like to think so. There's certainly a big kind of question, I think, in the minds of everybody who hears this for the first time, that, how could this be? They've never heard of it before. How on earth could there be, because most people are aware of, flying saucers and the idea of aliens, etc., but most people, I think, take the view that is, I don't know what they do with that, because if you think of the implications of that, it's so, it's beyond anything we've ever experienced on this planet. It's beyond anything that we have ever come to understand. Not being the center of the universe would be a big one. the Earth being round, a big one, the understanding of the atomic structure of our reality, the subatomic structure. I mean, it just goes on and on. But this is something beyond all of that. I mean, this is the human race becoming a cosmic species, understanding what it is and who else is out there and how they may be interacting with us. So given the level of
complication, I think.
Well,
it's complicated.
It's how do you get your mind around that? I mean, even for me, as somebody who was very open to this, it was still tough for me for the first month, I would say, of interviews to really accept that these people are what they understand that they are. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was talking with one of them, Juju, Jojali of Cuta, who's a reptilian hybrid, that I was feeling this incredible kind of cellular effervescence as we were doing an interview. There was myself and Barbara and Juju talking, and the two of those were in an exchange, and I was just feeling this kind of incredible energy in my forearms, my hands, and I was looking down. I wasn't talking about this, but I was just looking down at my hands and wondering what the hell. And Juju happened to casually mention, Miguel, you've got an incredible aura around your hands. And I was like, she can see that? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that was the moment that I crossed the threshold. That was the moment at which everything just kind of, the dimensions of it just rapidly expanded. And I started to understand that I was going to have to approach this on a whole new level, not just from taking information, but the level of what if that information is true? What if there is a reality to all of this? Because suddenly it went from trying to understand the theory of dimensions, multidimensionality, which, is a word that, Vanessa is particularly well drilled on, and we must get into that. But getting into all of the different layers of reality that this thing is basically peeling back, I'm still every day digesting, learning new things, coming to fresh understandings, because the reality that the hybrids share is vastly bigger than our kind of Western materialist paradigm that says there is nothing else. There's only material things. If you can't measure it and replicate it, it doesn't exist. It's basically not worth anybody's time or interest. So when I think people come to understand something of the idea of hybrids, they basically try to ram it into their paradigm. They basically try to compress it into their world and say, well, how can I take this information and understand it? So the way I could understand this is that it's not true, that they're lying, delusional, entirely mistaken, off on some crazy trip of their own. Right. However, I think if you are willing to spend time with this and begin to open your mind to the possibility that it may be true, I think what you find is that you begin to expand to accommodate this, because you can't, from a standing start, understand all of this. You have to work with the information. You have to expand to accommodate it. And that's a process. It's not like people say, convince me. I want something right now that is going to nail this for me, make it understandable. That isn't how it is. Not for most people. I think for a lot of people, they would just be generally aware that there is a vastly more complex reality that we are interacting with and that is interacting with us. And they would have an easier time with this. And people of other cultures who may have a much closer relationship with the spirit world. Most indigenous cultures do. They accept it as a part of life. But in Western society, we deem that to be superstition, backward thinking. And yet, when you talk to the hybrids, suddenly you have fresh context for all of those discussions and ideas. And I think that anybody willing to explore this, I think a little personal bravery may be required. I don't think anybody needs to approach it with any sense of faith, that this is something that they're having to go out on a limb to believe, to understand. It's something that's simply available. It's like meditation, for example. I don't think it's necessary to have a full understanding of the neurobiological responses and development that takes place in meditation in order to actually get something out of it, because it's fundamentally experiential. It's simply available to you. It's something that you can engage with, have an experience of, and you will have your own experience of it. And I think that anybody who reads Meet the Hybrids is going to enter a world of possibility. And for myself, it's been so expanding that it's even got me to the point of questioning my own identity. I mean, you talked about 7 billion people. You know, is it possible that some of those people are not entirely human, are not entirely of this earth?
Exactly.
I would think that it's perfectly possible.
If possible, and the possibility, too, that maybe all 7 billion fall into this category, and the level of awareness is different for everybody, where, where their roots really came from, where they're really from.
Yeah. Vanessa, what's your take on that?
Well, I think if we approach this first from a scientific aspect, I think anthropologists, archaeologists, and all the professionals in this work don't know our origins. I think that we can say that in fairness. So they're still discovering pieces of where humans have come from, and it's my, keeping that part in mind, it's my personal belief that all of us here are on the spectrum of hybridization. Mm-hmm. That comes from my, interactions with different ET groups, my interactions with my clients. I work with clients in a life coaching capacity using my psychic ability, and there are so many people that are coming forward with these experiences of either ET visitation or the knowing that they are not of this earth. It's just so common. It's rampant, actually. And people they're searching for themselves at this time. And so I feel like this is why cosmic disclosure and the evolution of the concept of what a hybrid is really coming forth, because the people at this point in time, the collective, is craving it because they are realizing as a whole, what does it mean to be human? And science isn't really offering the answers that they're feeling within their own being and their hearts. So, I feel like at this time, we're all kind of discovering as a whole the different layers of the keyword I like to use, multidimensionality, and what that means for each of us on our individual paths. So,
very interesting. Let me ask you, Vanessa, First of all, Miguel is referred to as the hybrids. Okay, I don't know if a question I'd have for you and the people in this book that they all that they interviewed to put this together. How did you know, or is it a spiritual sense, possibly a physical sense, or something that you've just known for many, many years that I don't want to say that you're different. That's not what I'm trying to say by any means, but you're special. You have something that most others may not have, or at least it's defined itself to you. How do you feel about that? And when did that come to you?
I feel like it's definitely a combination of both the spiritual and physical, knowing. But for me, I had a lot of very early paranormal experiences and ET visitations, with my earliest remembrances starting at age 3. And then also through my, younger years and into my teens, I would dream and have this knowing that, when we dream, we all go to these other dimensions and these different places, and it's a place where we can interact and have infinite possibilities. So my early years were really in discovering my power with astral projection and lucid dreaming. And I thought that all of these concepts and experiences were normal for people. So for me, it was just really ingrained. Okay, I interact with ghosts, I interact with ETs, I go to other places, other dimensions in my dreams, I dream about being on ships, I dream of different beings coming and interacting with me. So I kind of laugh now because, when you're younger, you have such an egocentric view of yourself and you think everyone is like you. But I realized into my teens that just wasn't so, because I'd share my experiences and these wonderful ET beings that would come to me and they were like, oh man, I don't know what you're talking about, but that's just not normal. And it kind of, I went through a process of thinking, oh man, I guess I am different, because I had the reflection of the people around me, my friends and peers as mirrors to say, oh wait, there's something to look at here, because I guess what I'm experiencing isn't part of the whole. So
did some of these experiences at a younger age, do they ever frighten you? I've interviewed many, many psychics. I've had contactees on the program many times. Some people talk about, and it sounds like, just prefacing it, this was a very enjoyable experience, has been very enjoyable for you. Were there ever times that maybe you were, I don't want to use maybe the word scared, but that's the only thing that comes to mind, or confusion, especially at an earlier age? Did any of that set in, or did you feel like when these things started happening, they were there for a reason and a purpose?
I had the whole spectrum, so definitely had the fear. I mean, my sister will tell you, she's 4 years younger than me, but I slept with her until I was like 15 years old because I couldn't deal with what would happen in the dark. But then I also had the beautiful experiences. So I had, the whole spectrum of things going on. And I think the benevolent experiences it was like a lifeline for me. It kept me thinking, well, yes, there are these weird things that are happening with these realms. Because, it just wasn't of this planet. It wasn't of, my normal space. So it kind of kept me in the framework, in my mind to say, well, there's something else out there, and I don't feel like everyone else here. And just kind of keeping that whole, am I an alien, in the back of my head? I used to joke about it when I was in my teens. And my friends would be like, you're so out there, you're like an alien. And, it was just a running joke.
Right.
In that space in your mind where you're like, no, I actually think that, but I don't want to come out and say that because that would shatter everything right now. So I didn't come to terms with that for a really long time. But yeah, so the whole spectrum of experiences, for sure.
As you grow older and wiser, these experiences, I assume, are continuing to happen to you. I would assume there's also different depths of the experience. Do you feel that, or do you find that you can explore this whole subject, explore this? I don't know, some would call it a gift. I would call it a gift. You can explore this gift and use your psychic abilities to just keep going deeper and deeper levels, deeper and deeper into your life.
Absolutely. And for me, I kind of, people might call this an awakening. I feel like there's so many levels of awakening, so I don't really like to call it that. But I had peak moments, 3.5 years ago where I really came to the understanding of, okay, all of those things that have happened to me in my early life, this is really something to look at. I did my undergrad, so I went through college. I did my undergrad in psychology, and it was very research-based and science-y, and I thought I wanted to be a researcher, so I kind of put my personal feelings about all of the quote-unquote fringe on hold, and then it came time where I graduated, and I was like, well, what am I going to do professionally? Nothing fits. I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And I came up on transpersonal psychology, which is it's spiritual psychology. It's transcending the self. And so that fit my professional model, but then also gave birth to my own views of myself. It helped me to integrate everything. So, 3.5 years ago, I really came to the understanding of what a starseed was. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what this was when I was 3 years old with these beings and through my childhood and teen years. And I told, Barbara and Miguel when we began the interviews last year, the word hybrid was a bit much for me to get on board with at first. Like it was right. Ooh, that's true. It felt true in my heart, but it felt so much more alien and different, and I didn't want to create so much separation from myself and humanity. So that was harder for me to integrate. But then with client sessions too, it was like alongside my personal life, clients were coming to me with the same stories, and I'm like, this is just bizarre. So through life coaching, I mean, they were coming to me, oh, I have these issues, and then it was like, but I'm having ET visitation. And so it was just a combination of personal, professional life that allowed me to really accept what that means to be hybridized, both on a soul level, in the energetic sense and in the physical sense. Feeling the DNA in your body, knowing that the DNA in your physical body is different, was certainly something to swallow. And I had my own dark night of the soul experiences with that, and having to come to terms with what that meant for myself. But then also recognizing that myself as a hybrid, and the hybrids in the book, and all of the hybrids that I know in my life that are coming together, we are really, really redefining what it means to be human. So I dropped hybrid and I just called myself human because I think humans are hybrids, just all on a different level. So yeah, to come full circle, I still think I'm human, but in a hybrid.
But in a hybridized sense.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Miguel, in your going through some of the talking points and some of the notes, I guess we could maybe cover these two questions, or if you could both cover these questions for us. The definition of what is a hybrid and how is a hybrid created, to kind of branch off as far as how a hybrid's created. I think that a lot of people that don't understand, of course, and I think Vanessa kind of defined it, maybe there's two different ways this occurs. Some sort of a physical interaction, and then a spiritual interaction. Would you both like to talk a little bit about what a hybrid is, and maybe Vanessa, of course, led to some of this, but maybe talk a little bit more in depth for our listeners as far as how the creation takes place and how the interaction takes place.
Well, I'll just say a couple of things. I'll say a couple of words on that. We talked to 8 people, and we got about 6 different possibilities. Not everybody knows exactly how they were created. Some people do. Vanessa will be able to give you chapter and verse on particular techniques. Rob, he listed about 4 different possibilities, including that because he's mantis hybrid, it's possible he created himself, because the mantis beings are ancient. They don't really die in the way that we think of. They can simply pick another form. Then another hybrid had told him, because, this is one of my favorite stories from the book. When Rob first met Jacqueline Smith in person, apparently their jaws just fell open because they realized that they knew each other from the ships. And so they got talking and, were able to share some of their mantis language, and even simultaneously did this mantis bow. There is a particular way that the mantis beings bow to one another. And they did this at the same time. Jacqueline described it as a soulful joy, something that you just can't experience with regular people. And that particular, aspect of herself. And so Rob had shared this connection with Jacqueline with another hybrid who said, well, if you think of Jacqueline's age and your age, she being old enough to be your mother and you meeting her on the ships, it is possible that you actually have some of her DNA and you guys are actually related to one another. So, there's been multiple methods that we've been made aware of, but I'd love Vanessa to describe for you her understanding of this, involving the process of spinning and galactic imprints.
Sure.
So, to piggyback on what you said, Miguel, I feel like there are so many different understandings of hybridization because there are multiple hybridization programs. So yes, I think it's all true. It is all occurring in a multitude of different ways. The way I understand hybridization is through my own lens and ship visitations. But we're going back a long time here. So going back to the ships and my participation with the hybridization programs, my first remembrances of being on the ship and seeing into the chambers and the rooms where we had, there's rooms where there was daycares and there's rooms that looked a little bit more science-y. People were like doctors and nurses and wearing lab coats and things, and just in a lot of ways this might trigger a lot of people, that will be listening. So just FYI, things looked a little sci-fi with test tubes and having vessels that were holding onto the soul essences. I never received the sense that I was in danger or that I was in a malevolent group or anything like that. I was surprised to see the way that things were, contained. But these little test tube, vessels that were holding onto soul essences had these like golden liquid plasma like substances inside these vessels. And I remember the woman that was training me in this space was telling me, well, this is where we have, source. These are source soul essences. These are going to be children. These are going to be unborn children. They're not at a stage yet. Almost like conception, like the most beginning point of conception here as we know it in a physical sense, but this is happening in an energetic sense. And then she tells me, so these are, this is the golden plasma that is the soul source. And then she tells me about all the people, because there's so many people standing and sitting around us. And she said, all these people have agreed to be part of this grand program. And the grand program is this hybridization program where they're sharing their energy, so galactic imprinting, galactic energy codes, or energetic codes, and they're sharing their physical DNA with us and with these children to assist in the evolution of the entire universe. And it's not just Gaia, not just planet Earth. And I was so honored to be shown this information, to be shown this this whole initiative, and it obviously helped me understand myself in what was going on with everything. So there was that piece, and then after seeing the golden plasma, she's like, we collect different codes from different people, and on the ships and in the labs, I would say, they fuse the codes. They fuse the energies together with this golden plasma. And the spinning that I mentioned in the book and that Miguel just referenced is they go through this spinning process where it spins at an incredible rate. I can't even tell you like if it's the speed of light. I have no frame of reference for how fast it spins, but it spins very fast. So it looks like a golden orb, and then all of the pieces of the DNA spinning together, fusing all of the pieces together, and it's like the piece of the soul, or the soul essence that comes in just before physical conception. So this is all pre physical conception here on this planet, and then the babies, they go through this process of needing a lot of care and a lot of love. So there's like doulas and nurses on the ships that their sole job is just to deliver pure love to these babies that have gone through the spinning process. So it's just like infusing them with pure love. And it makes me cry when I think about it, because it's just like there's so much effort that goes into this, and so many people that have come together, so many souls have come together in beings to make this possible and to bring it forward. And so they go through this process of spinning, and there's the doulas and the nurses that deliver the love. It's just almost like a NICU, just in an energetic sense, where they are just caring for them. And then the souls go through a process of where they kind of test out what Earth is like. So if the souls are, some of the souls are not being born on planet Earth. So I just have to make that clear. So some of these souls are going to other planets, but we'll talk just for the purpose of this interview to talk about planet Earth. But the ones that are going to planet Earth take almost like test runs into the womb spaces of their mothers. So the women here that are giving physical birth to children that are hybrids had and have already experienced the babies in their womb space in an energetic sense, in the soul sense, before they are completely physical. And I know Mary Rodwell talks about this in chapter 11 of her book about missing pregnancy. So they test out the womb space, and some women know that there's something in their womb space. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And they'll get their pregnancy test, and it comes back negative. They're not pregnant, because the baby, the soul is occupying the space in an energetic sense. It's not physical yet. It's not detected by these tests. And the baby is just testing out the frequencies of Earth. It's testing out the mother and collecting more of the mother's frequencies, more of the father's frequencies too. I mean, the fathers don't have a womb space, but I know that the babies will kind of swirl around in their fields just to kind of collect more of their energy and their essence and see who they want to incarnate to. And sometimes they test out multiple womb spaces. So they're going into different women and sharing their essence with them, and the women are sharing their energies with them. And sometimes, like I've experienced this on the flip side. So I am a hybrid, but I've also experienced hybrid children where I'm not going to incarnate them or not going to physically give birth to them, but they've spent time with me. And I think we're also redefining parenthood and motherhood and fatherhood with this program as well. So that's an aside. But so the babies come in and they experience the co-sharing, and then they go back to the ships. And sometimes babies are born on ships. So some women who have had the fetus implanted energetically also have the fusion of physical DNA. And sometimes these women have partners on planet Earth, and sometimes they don't. So I've had more than 3 women in my life that I have contact with have described, having almost like an immaculate conception type experience where they're like, I'm pregnant and I haven't had sex in over a year. And so it's like, how is this happening? And that is another awareness that some women are having that's, bringing them to information about hybrids. So some women give birth to hybrids on the ships in the physical sense, in an energetic sense. Sometimes it's just the light bodies of the mother and the fetus that are, giving birth. Going back to what I've seen on ships, I've interacted with the souls of these children, and they look, like infants and then like toddlers, and they go through this whole growth process energetically. And there are people there to socialize them and teach them about different concepts, psychic arts, telepathy, astral projection, all of those mystery techniques. And then also about planet Earth, and some of them are schooled on different physics concepts. And so it's very, very dynamic, you know, the different things that they learn. And then at some point they may choose to incarnate, to go back into the womb space in the energetic sense and join with the physical DNA and then incarnate on this planet. So you can see how this can take, I guess, multiple forms. Between what happens with the energetic piece and then joining in with the physical piece. Are they born on the ship? Are they implanted? Is the DNA fused into the mother's womb while the baby's in utero? So it's very, very dynamic, and not all hybrids are created in the same way. We're all equal. We're not created in the same way. And that's just the nature of the hybridization programs.
A very complicated assembly line of life, if you will.
Right, and I try to describe it the best way I can, because I also, you know, I think as a person that knows about hybridization programs, you know, in this galactic sense, we just don't have the vernacular for it yet. It's really difficult to describe, you know, I guess, how do you relate this in Earth terms or in an analogy that people can understand? So yeah, we're definitely discovering how to describe this and how to relay the information too.
Let me ask you both, in your when you were putting the book together, Miguel and Vanessa, do you hybrids, and I don't like to use that term for some reason, but I guess for the sake of the conversation we will, when you see somebody, Vanessa, that is a hybrid, and of course the book addresses 8 different individuals, are you, I don't want to say drawn to them, but from a physical reaction, if you want to call it, when you encounter another hybrid, do you usually immediately know, or is it masked and it takes time where, you know, walls come down a little bit and then you realize this, or do you get this kind of that sense immediately when you encounter another hybrid?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel, I mean, both experiences happen where it's like you either recognize it in the physical traits or it's just like an energy about them. It's just their vibe, you know, their aura. Personally, so I think my recognition too happens because I'm recognizing my frequencies reflected in them. So they may have similar galactic origins or imprints. So that happens. And I can also recognize other people that don't have the same DNA traits that I do, but I have a lot of Syrian DNA from Sirius B. So when I see other Syrians, for me, it's recognizable in the eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have Syrian eyes. And it's almost like this exclamation that comes out of me. And sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe that wasn't appropriate for this time and space. But they almost always say, oh my gosh, yeah, I love the Syrians. I really connect with the Syrians. And so they already know. So it's, you know, it's never too weird. I've never, you know, felt like, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. Sometimes in myself, but the person always receives it very well. So yes, recognizing that, it's like a color or like a specific frequency that's transmitted through the lights in Syrians. And then, like, I have a lot of Lyran DNA, so sometimes I'll just be able to I see also in the eyes and the shape of the eyes with Lyrans, because they're cat-like lion beings, feline beings, and so some people just, not everyone that has a cat-shaped eye is Lyran, I can't say that, but a lot of times I'll recognize the specific Lyran trait in the eyes, and it's always a wonderful feeling because you feel like, oh, there's my soul. They're part of my soul tribe. They're part of my family. So yeah. Interesting.
Miguel, let me ask you, in writing the book, and I've had Barbara on the show before, but this, again, it just opens up so many more doors and so many more questions. Do you feel that these individuals, Miguel, affected your, let's call it spirituality, when you started writing this book? Do you feel that, again, I look at you in reading your bio, look at all your work and your past work. all accredited, very high ranking in your field. Now you went down another path, and that had to be a big decision for you to make to go ahead and even put this together. Because this whole subject of ufology, hybrids, extraterrestrials, of course, I think, as I said earlier, most people are being open-minded about things, but there are a lot of groups still that, that's a fringe subject, that's an X-Files type of thing. So I guess what I'm getting to here is, do you feel that these hybrids, these individuals, maybe if you want to call it, empowered you or spiritually empowered you to go ahead and write this book and educate people?
Well, it's a funny question. What I mean by that is, I guess there's a few different parts to that question, but you asked, some almost suggesting, was it brave to do this? And other people, quite a number of people said, you and Barbara, it's so brave to put this together. But I don't think it takes bravery to do something that you're not scared of. Right. If you are attracted to something, if you want to explore something, as Barbara and I do, then it's not bravery. So from that perspective, no. But in terms of what may have attracted me to do this, I mean, this is what I mean in terms of the kind of personal expansion that goes on, excuse me, as a part of a process like this. I mean, how many other processes are like this? I don't know. But I guess there's a lot of possibilities. I've always felt a connection to at least the idea of ETs. I was given a book on UFOs when I was very young, then taken to see Star Wars. I just always had this sense that they are there. I knew that they were very intelligent. I had a sense they were good. I had a sense that there was a lot of benevolence out there, probably more out there than there is down here in many ways. So I was never fearful of the subject, but the sighting in 2009, I am more and more of the opinion that was no coincidence. When we saw this, we were sky watching at night, this it looks like a satellite going over, but then it just massively increases in size and luminosity. And Louise, my partner, said what I was thinking, but I couldn't spit it out. She said, "My God, it's like they're looking at us." Mm-hmm. And the same thought was going through my head. It really felt that these guys were eyeballing us. But whatever that was up there, it knew we were looking. And then it carried on tracking across the sky and then flared again. Excuse me. And I just shot off in a streak of light. And our mutual friend, Bill Forte, was just showing me his footage the other night of something that looked just the same in terms of that powering up and streaking off. I mean, it's a lovely piece of footage. And it was great to see for the first time something that looked like the thing that we saw. And I'm more and more of the opinion that was in its own way activating, because then it's like, well, that's a spaceship. So that's real.
Right.
Because obviously you hear people saying, well, it's all, psyops and it's CIA something. Well, I'm pretty sure that the CIA didn't rig that up for the benefit of myself and Louise and whichever other Azorians happen to be awake at that time of night.
Right.
Right. So
they do here in the United States, though, Miguel. It happens all the time.
Oh yeah.
No, I'm just joking with you.
Well, gosh, I mean, who knows? Who of us really knows? I mean, we have our intuitions. But in terms of changes and things of that sort, Like I said, that first moment where Juju basically was looking at my aura without me saying a word, from that moment on, things started to shift. And in every conversation I have with Juju, I have this whole new understanding that comes up. Every single conversation with her, something is triggered, something is unlocked. So she really seems to be connected. We seem to have some connection, the two of us. But whenever I'm talking to any of the hybrids, there's all kinds of things that open up. I mean, the last time I talked to Juju, just last week, I suddenly had this revelation that if you're asking these guys broadly, what is this about? Why is this happening? In general, the word ascension will appear in the conversation. This is about a kind of spiritual evolution and in some respects a physical evolution. Well, it's a wildly complex subject, and I will certainly indulge Vanessa in, in her thoughts on that. But the idea seems to be that one of the things the hybrids are doing is they're anchoring higher frequencies here. And they are, I mean, if you talk to Robert Fullington about this, he talks about the fact that that higher frequency is being slowly introduced onto this planet through the hybrids and probably other beings as well. It would not surprise me at this stage. And one of the things they do is in raising people's frequency, they do raise the energetic level of that person in some way. And I have physically felt that in every conversation I've ever had with Juju, and I think every conversation I've had with Robert, I've really noticed it. I mean, it's like within about 10 minutes of talking with Juju, it's like I've just had a double espresso. And that buzz, if you want to call it that, my whole body feels like it is just vibrating. And people talk about vibration all the time and good vibes, bad vibes. My goodness. I mean, it's real. It's undeniable. There is always a part of me that is trying to disprove this, that is trying to keep one foot on the ground and be able to sit with skeptics and say, yeah, I don't know. Is it true? I don't know. Just so those guys feel better and so I don't feel like I'm wildly out on a limb. And yet it is absolutely undeniable what I feel when I'm talking to these guys. It really does raise my vibration. And with all of that, I also realized talking to Juju that this whole thing has triggered my own awakening. They talk about awakening people, activating people. These things have been happening to me for about 9 months now. And my view of reality is completely different. Well, not completely different, but it's just, I'm not the same person. I'm absolutely not the same person. And that's just me. So for everybody who connects with these guys, I would think that there is that potential. And that's part of why when it came up that Barbara was, we were talking about, her doing a lecture at this year's UFO Congress. And I said, well, you've got to have these guys on stage. I mean, how about that? Would they do that? Is that something that the organizers would allow? Because, I mean, the whole point is meet the hybrids. People could actually meet the hybrids instead of Barbara and I getting out there and, trying to sort of muddle our way through some of these concepts, many of which we have not experienced. It's like, virgins giving a lecture on sex. I mean, if that's not too indelicate, I mean, really.
All right, everybody, welcome back We're going to pick back up again with Miguel Mendonca and Vanessa LaMorte. I want to thank you again both for being here tonight and giving up time on your weekend to share your experiences and your stories with us.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
We were talking the first hour, of course. Miguel's new book is called Meet the Hybrids: The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. Before we go any further, and I forgot to mention this in the first hour, where can our listeners get your book, Miguel?
It is online all over the place. It's on Amazon worldwide, Barnes & Noble. In fact, people can find links and ordering information on our website, which is meetthehybrids.wordpress.com. And there is an ordering page there, and there's links to all kinds of other international sites for Australia and Norway and Sweden and all over the show. But Amazon principally.
Plus, it's nice, too. You can go out there, of course. We're talking with Vanessa right now live, but all the other people that Miguel interacted with, you can get to them through that. Very well put together. Vanessa, why don't you go ahead, your website, for our listeners that would like, our listeners and, if I can, other hybrids that could be tuning in or listening to this show right now that maybe have questions and need some help. And I'm sure that's something that you do is people that have questions and maybe are confused. Why don't you put out your website and your information so they can go ahead and get a hold of you?
Sure. My website is www.vanessalamorte.com. Very easy, just first and last name. Shoot me an email if you feel that you are struggling with, I guess coming out as a hybrid, coming out as a starseed, want more guidance about the subject and any experiences that, you could use guidance on. That's what I specialize in.
Even above and beyond the hybrid thing, that you're there to help. You're there to use your abilities, your talents, and your gifts to help people out.
Absolutely.
We were talking in the last hour, guys, about, Vanessa, of course, went through things, and I'm looking at a statement that you put in the notes here, Miguel, of complexity and multidimensional nature of this whole subject. Again, as I stated before, a very, very complex spiritual assembly line of life, if you will, and how it changed you in writing this book. And maybe we could go ahead and pick back up, like you mentioned about this sighting that you had, and I can definitely connect with you. Back in the fall here in Salt Lake City, I had a very, very similar experience. I was sitting outside. It was actually one of the last nights that it was decent weather here in Utah before winter set in. It was a Thursday night. And I was sitting back just looking up at the stars. All the leaves had been removed from the trees. Of course, it's cold. Looking up at the stars, and probably around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and I noticed going overhead, which I thought, was the moon wasn't out. Stars were very bright that night, very clear night, and I saw what appeared to be a satellite going overhead. And usually, I think most of us would agree, if you're not using a telescope or not doing any sky watching, it's a matter of chance that you're going to see something. And here I saw this little satellite going over. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And I'm sitting there watching it, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, there's another one kind of right next to it. But I've never seen two satellites parallel each other. Got up and took a little closer look, and I look off to my southeast, and I see more coming, and then one coming up the valley, and all intersecting up north. Again, I don't believe these were, I know they weren't drones, they weren't aircraft. They were little bright lights, very, very high in altitude. They all joined, and then they all shot off in 45-degree angles in many different directions, and that was it. Poof, it was gone, And you hit on something when you were talking about your partner and you seeing this. I've often asked the question of myself. I have had a couple of what I will call UFO sightings, if you want to call it that, because I can't identify what they are. And I always preface it as, if they are of this world, wow, we have some very amazing technology. If they are not of this world, I've seen something very cool and unique. Yeah. But I also asked the question to myself, did I see that? Was that there for me? And I think you kind of alluded that. I called Bill up, of course. I called Erica Lukes, who is the MUFON director for Utah. And Erica, she's a good friend. She's been on the program. And we ended up engaging in this conversation, I think, for about an hour, because of all the things that we see here in Utah. But again, is that something, is that sighting, is that there for us? Is that there for one individual? And I sometimes believe that it really is. And I feel that I get the sense by what you said that was put there for you.
Well, yeah. In the book, I think Juju and Jacqueline both alluded to this, that I think it was Jacqueline who said this, that it could be that there's 50 people outside at night, but only one, maybe two people might see a craft because they are able to, they have technology that to us is just baffling. Again, it's that thing that we can't fit it in our paradigm, but to them it may be incredibly simple. Maybe like, I always think of, for some reason, an ant walking across an iPad. I mean, it's got no concept of what that is, how it works, what it does. It's simply having an interaction on some level, but the rest is completely beyond it. And it may seem like a highly complex thing, but actually, conceptually, it's very simple. So it may be that conceptually, those things are very simple and they really are there for us. It's just that we couldn't understand how it could be that 6 people could be stood around and only one person sees the craft. Okay, if you go that way, if you go down that rabbit hole and ask, well, why? Why is it? Is that one of the ways in which the beings trigger us down here? Because in my life, I've only met a handful of people that have had sightings, and all of them had significant shifts in consciousness as a result of this, because you're shown something that is supposed to be impossible, you're told doesn't exist, that only crazy people see, etc. And yet growing numbers of people are seeing these things, are having these experiences, and once you're kind of involved in the community, if you like, and you have more and more of these conversations, you find that most of the people involved, and I'm actually doing this as research for my new book, talking to people about, in part, I interviewed Bill just the other day, in fact, what is it that triggers people? What is it that activates people? And actually, Vanessa and I were talking about, potentially a book that's, orbiting the subject of activation, because that in itself is an incredibly interesting topic. And I think that for most people that have an interest in this, that might be listening tonight, they can think back to a sighting they had. And sure, once you've had that moment, you are through the looking glass. The world is never quite the same way again. You understand that there are things interacting here that are not meant to be there. As to why, one can only speculate. But if I hadn't had that sighting, the book wouldn't have happened. This conversation wouldn't be taking place. All of the people listening to this, all of the people that have read it, all the people that were at the UFO Congress the other day, that lecture wouldn't have taken place. So this whole kind of unveiling of the hybrid subject that is going on, that started because, at least for me, because MUFON actually put on YouTube 2 of Barbara's lectures. And so if that hadn't happened, this wouldn't be taking place. So what seems to be at work here is outside influences are triggering a lot of investigation, activation, sharing, education, and something is happening. I was often hearing in my environmental career that there is a sort of awakening of consciousness on this planet at this time. And yet, for the level of work that I was doing at the kind of global systemic level, I just couldn't see it. I just thought that's wishful thinking. That's just crazy talk. Where is this? Turn on the news, show me awakening, show me how things are shifting. And yet, as I have gone through my own awakening and talked to, particularly in the wake of the book coming out, talking to more and more people who are interested in this subject, including people like yourself, it's evident that this awakening is actually taking place, and sightings of craft, personal experiences, and that's just craft. That's not even the people who I talk to on a weekly basis that are being visited by beings all the time. And I hear of more and more experiences as my network grows that are having constant interactions. And when you get to this point of building up layer upon layer of information, and then you have the personal experiences, to get to the point where you have, you might be in a social situation and you talk about, you know, what you do perhaps, and you meet a skeptic and they say, convince me. I mean, how do you at that point get that person to where you are? I don't even think it's about that. I think that people have their awakening in whatever way it occurs, and it will take its own path. I do think that it's important that we shift human consciousness. That's one of the key reasons that I'm doing that. But I don't believe it's anyone's job to force it upon people. I mean, Juju would say knowledge can be a poison if you're not ready.
Right.
And I think there has to be, I mean, you've kind of got a double-edged sword. I mean, you've got, I feel like I'm almost being pulled in two different directions. Part of me wants to almost become evangelical about this, given my own journey, my own experiences, my own understandings, and say to people, you almost want to grab people by the shoulders and say, my God, this thing's real. What does that mean? And yet on the other side, you think, but how do you have that conversation when people are almost at square one?
But so, you know, Miguel, I think let me just make this statement and see if you both agree. We need skeptics. We really do. Not debunkers, because the debunker to me is just the individual that no matter what you say is going to, they're going to dispute it. It doesn't matter. But a skeptic, I think, is a good thing. At one time, I never really thought that, but it is a good thing because it keeps everything in balance. It balances out the equation, and it makes people like yourself, the researchers, myself, I've said this so many times, I'm not a ufologist, I'm not a paranormal researcher or cryptozoologist. I'm a researcher's researcher, I think is the best thing. I use this program to bring people like yourself and Vanessa on and many others to talk about their experiences and their work. But I think skeptics are good because it keeps us striving, keeps people like you striving to dig deeper. And if maybe you can't even deliver any sort of proof, if you will, you can't bring a tangible item to the table, it gets people thinking. And that's the whole thing, is opening up people's minds. And that's where I think in these fields we move forward so quickly. It just gets everybody thinking in the mix. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I would throw that one out to Vanessa. Why don't you share your experience of? You were telling me a little bit about, some of the connections that you had immediately after the lecture at the UFO Congress.
Mm. Well, I felt like the audience there really did receive the message of Meet the Hybrids as a whole very well. There were definitely some people who, really wanted more information and were very skeptical and sometimes interrogative in some ways. But I felt that, I have to agree with you, Pat, that, the skeptic is important because I think what it does for those of us who understand our truth is that it's a healthy reflection to convey more of that truth and convey more detail to help,
Right.
I guess, help them, guide them in a sense, because I think that's what a skeptic does. They're asking questions because they want more information. So then it's reflected back to us to give them more information if we so choose. And that's kind of what I came up against at the UFO Congress. Some people were very skeptical, and it just made me stand in my power, I mean, personally, and just helping them to see, where I was coming from as far as, being a human. And I like to always bring up frameworks, concepts that they can relate to. Every household has a paranormal story, whether it's a UFO sighting, whether it's ET contact, whether it's ghosts or whatever. So I always bring that up. Well, what have you experienced? Because behind their questions are their own experiences. And I think it helps them to reflect in a more introspective way than in an attacking way, or in, seeing these concepts as so outside of themselves, because then they have to say, well, yeah, I have had that experience, and what do I do with that information? Because they have the empirical evidence of their experience that says there's something else out there. So that's kind of how I deal with that, and that's what how I worked with the people at the conference.
Let me ask a question. If I could just throw a little side note in here, or a little just a little side piece. The whole, we've talked tonight about ET contact. You've brought that up several times. Do you get questions? And of course, I've had a lot of people that don't consider themselves contactees, but abductees. Probably one of the interviews that I did that was the most heart-touching to me was Jesse Long. I don't know if you know Jesse is. He went through an abduction scenario for 34 plus years. I had him on the program. I'll tell you, after the interview for 2 hours, it had me kind of shaken up a little bit, because Jesse did not by any means he conveyed that he didn't have anything good happen. And of course, we get a lot of abductees. They take it the same way. I guess I'd like to get your take with what we've been talking about here this evening. It's been all very positive things. What do you say, or how do you respond to people that claim to have been abducted, maybe throughout their whole life? Nothing good. It's been nothing but painful physical experiments. The grays that terrify them. The mean-looking reptilians. How do you answer that? How do you address those individuals?
Well, if I can say a couple of words on that, it's one of the most interesting things that came out of this. About 2 or 3 weeks into the kind of initial research, after Barbara and I had made the agreement, I began sketching out a sort of draft structure for the interviews, and I had we had a pretty good idea in mind of how we wanted to come at this. And then Barbara said, you really should look at the work of Christiane Quiros. She did a PhD on ET human hybrids, in which she interviewed them. And I was like, what? Why am I only hearing about this now? This is crazy. So sure enough, I looked it up, and 16 years ago, Christiane Quiros did her PhD thesis on this subject. And she interviewed 6 North American women. And when I looked at the questions, my jaw was just hanging open. I couldn't believe how similar the questions were. And so I contacted Christiane, and we got to know each other a little bit. And I've got her dissertation, read it, and it's a stunning piece of work. I mean, a really solid piece of work. And I had already read twice David Jacobs' book, The Threat. So those were the sort of 2 key texts I was looking at prior to our research. And by the time we were done with our research, it was clear that you basically had David Jacobs on one side, talking about one set of experiences, generally negative, fearful, causing incredible difficulty, distress in people's lives, a great deal of suffering. And then you had this completely different story that had emerged in research, the PhD research of Dr. Kiros and Barbara and myself. And so I had to look at this, these two threads and, try to get some understanding, perform some kind of analysis, and look at what is being indicated. And what was clear to me by the end of it is that they're basically talking, like, probably everybody is right in their conclusions, but we're talking about different hybrid programs, different ETs, different agendas. Now, if you talk to particularly Robert, I remember him bringing this up, that there are you might have beings that are called mantis, but there are very different kinds of mantis. There are very different kinds of reptilians, and greys, and so on. And Juju basically divided them into two separate camps, broadly discrete camps, service to self and service to others. David Jacobs seems to be analyzing the activity of the service to self ETs that are here for themselves, principally, that meeting their needs. Whereas the hybrids that we're connected to are connected to the service to others ETs, who, in my general understanding, just as a term to throw around this, I see them almost as cosmic missionaries, that they have gone through their ascension process. They are spiritually evolved beings who are looking to spread that universally, galactically, cosmically, whatever you want to call it. And so, in other words, it's not that one camp is right and one camp is wrong about who's coming here and why. It's that a heck of a lot of people are coming here with different agendas, and we're all basically experiencing different parts of it. I think that is the general picture. I mean, as soon as you pursue any of that, of course, I think you get into all sorts of complexity, but I think that's at least my understanding at this point of how that breaks down.
I agree. What's your take on it, Vanessa?
I have to agree with Miguel. I've working with the clients that have the whole spectrum of experiences, whether they identify as being an abductee or a contactee, I have to validate their experience because it's happening. The whole spectrum of everything is happening. We have service to self agendas. We have service to others agendas. So I definitely agree. I feel like on a transpersonal and spiritual level, it's important to evaluate the purpose behind all of the experiences, and how sometimes I'm not invalidating anyone's experience, so I just want to make that clear. But sometimes when we have an experience that is perceived as negative, that's a judgment, and sometimes a limiting belief system, because the experience is trying to give birth to more insight, more reflection, more integration for the psyche. So in my personal sessions, when we talk about abduction and what went on, people relating their story and they're trying to gain framework and gain integration about it, I like to ask them, well, what do you feel like you're trying to learn from this, or your soul is trying to learn from this? Why did it show up? And more often than not, we can kind of transmute these perceptions of abduction into something that they're learning. And it doesn't shift the experience. It doesn't shift the experience in itself to say that it goes from being an abduction experience to a contactee experience, but more so that my clients and the work that I do, we're gaining an understanding about what is going on and the purpose behind everything, and it's giving birth to more information. Those are my thoughts on the abduction and contactee and how we're working with it, because it's happening. I wish it didn't happen, abductions in the sense that people are experiencing trauma or experiencing that. But I'm finding that the clients are definitely, and the people that I'm surrounding myself with, they're definitely gaining deeper levels of understanding. And then it's interesting because after that happens, something shifts where they don't experience the abductive quality of their visitation anymore. It's almost like once they've understood what's going on, in whatever facet, because it's very vast, so I can't say that it's the same for every person, something shifts and they're able to experience like the next part of their mission, the next part of their soul's path. And I think this speaks to the more greater cosmic initiative that's going on, and understanding how we're being called to not polarize our experiences between good and bad and negative, positive, that kind of thing.
And that's interesting, because that was a question I had for you. Is I think that in life, when we try to, as humans, when we try to relate good and bad. Of course, if we want to look at it from a religious perspective, it's maybe God and Lucifer or the devil. We try to make black and white, good and bad. And sometimes I think people get hung up because I think there's a little bit more to it. Sometimes I think bad experiences are there, just like the skeptics. We need bad to have good. We have to have a measuring point. But do you think that in the, I don't know if you want to, let's just call it the ET community, because I think that's how most people, what I've heard today, there's a lot to grasp. And I'm again, in doing this program for as many years as I have, I thought I've grasped it all, and I haven't by any means. I'm really way behind the curve, and I think a lot of people are. But do you feel, Vanessa, that there are good and bad ETs? They're good and bad grays? Or do you think it's maybe more misunderstandings or misinterpretations by the people that encounter these beings?
All of it. I definitely feel that there are, and I'm going to speak from my own experience. I've interacted with many, many, many grays. To talk about grays, I feel for them because I've had my own incarnations with their groups. And I feel for them because they're misunderstood, because their mechanism for communication and the mechanisms for emotional relation they're just different. A lot of people will say, grays don't have emotions. And I feel like that's not necessarily true. They just don't relay their emotions the way we do. So it's hard to understand them, or to understand where they're coming from. So we're bridging, this interspecies communication and how we relate to one another. So, there's that, the misunderstanding, the misconception. Then there's also, sometimes people will see grays and then they have the cellular memory of maybe an abduction that happened with a gray that wasn't so benevolent. And they're automatically using that framework to judge what they're experiencing. So grays are always bad. There's that. And there's the fact that there are some beings, part of the Zeta group, grays, tall grays, tall whites, short grays, however we want to talk about them, that, yes, have a more service to self agenda. But I like to say that our universe is vast, and the beings that we experience and that we can interact with are vast. And it's just like, just think about the universe as planet Earth as a microcosm for the greater universe. I mean, we've got all kinds of people here with different ideas of what's right and what's wrong and what we should be doing. So that's kind of what's going on a deeper level out there as well. And it's also bridging the perception perspective rather, that this is happening outside of ourselves, or this is something that's happening outside of us, but kind of understanding Earth is like, it's like the countries here. We have America, we've got Europe. We're part of the same planet, and it's dissolving that barrier, that separation, and seeing planet Earth as just a part of the piece, and we're all interacting together and understanding the spectrum.
Miguel, let me ask you, as far as abductions or contacts, of course, um, do you get in your country, in the UK, in Europe, in your part of the world, on the other side of this globe, are these experiences, are these, yeah, I call them experiences because that's what they really are they happening there? They seem to be, and again, and this is just maybe lack of knowledge, but of course everybody talks about all the abductions take place here in the United States. Does this kind of, does this happen, I shouldn't say does it happen there, but is it voiced as heavily there in your country and your surrounding countries as it is here in the United States?
Well, it's. I think that's a tough call to make because I'm not too personally sure what I'd be comparing it to. But my understanding is that there is plenty of contact here. I've talked to a number of people through this project and beyond it that are experiencers, that are experiencing things on a regular basis here. I mean, just the level of sighting reports, if that has any kind of correlation, we had a big wave of...
That would be a good measuring tool.
Yeah, I mean, we had a big wave of triangle sightings around the world last year in about a 2-week period, something like that. Because I have a Google alert set up just for the term UFO, so I'll just read every day that day's articles online, and I noticed that black triangles were seen globally over the course of a very short period of time. So, I mean, these guys don't carry passports. They can show up where they like. There's no, there's just no constraint. I think if we've learned anything at all in 70 years of ufology, it's that these guys really don't have any constraints as we understand them. They may have their own, but I feel like it is something that is touching people all over the world throughout time, across space. If you start digging into this, like in Johnny Mack's book, Passport to the Cosmos, where he connects with people from indigenous cultures, Nancy Redstar's book, Star Ancestors, brings out the kind of connections between Native Americans and star beings. In fact, I was connected to a Native American hybrid who understands she's an Andromedan hybrid, who's a friend of Bill's. So I feel like this is happening all over.
And not just in one place. I would, as a side note, Vanessa, I would love to get your whole gang down here at Skinwalker Ranch and find out what's going on down there. The activity level has just been off the charts again.
I'm interested to know, and to discover that with you. To piggyback on what Miguel said, I think that maybe we don't know the numbers. I think that contact's happening everywhere. I mean, we may not know the numbers, specifically between one country versus the other, what's represented because of cultural differences. I think that maybe America, and I'm just going to say this, but maybe America feels at liberty to be more expressive than maybe other countries. So maybe that's why we're talking about it more here, or maybe that's why it's perceived to be that way versus other countries. But I definitely feel like contact's happening everywhere because my clients are from all over the world. They're not just coming from America either. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let me throw this out to both of you, and more so, Vanessa, to you. How do you answer the question of the black-eyed children? Of course, right away when we hear that, I think a lot of people take that and they tie that. Some people say, well, it's a hybrid that's maybe more closely tied to a gray. What's your thought, Miguel? What's your thought on the black-eyed children? Do they even exist? Is that something that somebody has come up with, or do you think that there's some substance to that?
Well, I feel like there are multiple possibilities, and if I've learned anything at all in the last year of doing this work, it's that I know nothing, and most of us know nothing. We get little glimpses, little pieces, and we all have to come together and have this kind of conversation and compare notes. Try to develop an understanding from multiple perspectives, because Vanessa can run the gamut, in one person. She could give you the psychological, potential psychological explanations for this, as well as the ET perspective, if you like. Then you can have other people, like if you talk to Dr. Rita Louise, she would bring in the mythological background to this type of subject area. I mean, for me, The Black-Eyed Children was one of those subjects that scared the hell out of me when I read it.
Me too.
And I thought, oh my God, no, I'm just closing that book. Somebody else has got that one, I'll stick to hybrids. Black-Eyed Children, no thanks. I mean, I don't know. And that, I guess, gives me an insight into how some people feel about the idea of ETs interacting down here. It's the unknown. That is man's greatest fear. Humanity has always feared the unknown more than anything else. And Black-Eyed Children, I mean, who knows? I don't know. They could be here to make a particularly important contribution. And it may be something that is nascent in its expression on this planet. It may only just be showing up, or it may be just another twist on something that's been happening for millennia. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that, Vanessa?
I honestly feel like you said everything I would have said. The only other thing that I would want to contribute to that is the possibility that they're shapeshifters. They can be completely ET beings in a shapeshifted body. I think that might speak to some of the mythological perspectives on that. But yeah, there's a lot of possibilities for the Black-Eyed Children, and probably a lot of truths to that.
Let me ask you this, Vanessa. Now, Miguel, I'm going to go a little deep on this one just for a minute or two. Do you think, and I'm going to be very respectful when I put this out here. Do you believe, like we talked about the Black-Eyed Children, that I guess I got to back up just a little bit. We have an author here in Utah that wrote a book about Skinwalker Ranch. He's a Skinwalker Ranch researcher. His name is Ryan Burns. He's been on my program. I've met him in person several times. He actually lives in the Uinta Basin, right around Skinwalker Ranch. Of course, Skinwalker Ranch is just nothing more than a place card holder. There's a lot of things that happen in the Uinta Basin. Light portals that appear, people, beings, whatever you want to call it, come out of these portals, they close. Lights that fly over the ground, very low, sometimes very high. There's been a lot of recorded unusual activity down there, everything from the wolf dogs to supposedly, crypto creatures. But one thing that Ryan did write about, and I've heard about, and this is not just in his book, but I actually found it in some other places, that in Duchesne, Utah, we're in the Uinta Basin, which is very close to Skinwalker Ranch, there is an individual who is very tall, tends to wear a baseball cap, a coat, even in the middle of summer, somewhat sticks out because of the height. Some people have encountered this individual, and the people that have actually had the opportunity to encounter this individual and be very up close said this is a very non-human looking person. Do you think, and where I'm saying I'm going to go a little deep on this, that there could be possibly extraterrestrial, I don't want to call it experiments, but maybe crossbreeding or something that might have gone wrong, and yet those individuals were left here on this planet, if that makes sense? Is that out of the realm of possibility, Vanessa? Maybe something that just went awry and was left here?
I don't think that's too far-fetched at all.
Now, I'm not talking about monsters now by any means, but
Right.
again, people that have seen some different things, and of course, right away, we look at, as humans, we look at each other. Of course, beings on other planets under different gravity fields could change the shape. I found a little program online one time that said this is how you would look if you were actually born on Mars. You wouldn't look human. You would actually change in time because of gravity levels. And of course, you adapt to your environment, which really makes a lot of sense. So right away, because an individual looks different doesn't mean it's a monster or something scary. It's just a person is a product of their environment, their physical environment. But again, I've had a lot of listeners over the years send in pictures and send in stuff and say, "What do you think about this? What do you?" And I just wanted to throw that out to both of you, and since we've been very open about this whole subject.
Well, if I could, I guess, offer one thought. You talked about Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounds. And as you were talking about the mixture of activity down there, and I'm not well versed in the subject. I'm a broad understanding of what's going on there, but not in detail. But as you were talking, the same guy came up twice in my mind. A guy called Derek Savory. Do you know him? Have you interviewed him before?
I'm going to have him on the program in the month of March.
Okay. So he, wow. So I probably don't want to give all this away up front then. You probably want to save it for that conversation. But let's just say that if you were to throw out that subject to Derek and talk about kind of multiple phenomena in an area which covers many different areas of the paranormal, Derek would have a lot to say based on personal experience where he lives. So it seems that in certain places you do get a kind of confluence of entities, of activity, and it can all look really messy and complicated from the outside, but there's a particular angle that he would have that may illuminate that. And he came to mind for a second reason when he started talking about a tall figure that was not quite human. That's something else to ask Derek about. I don't know if that is connected to the other things, but it's just interesting that all of the things that you suggest seem to be happening, manifesting on his doorstep where he lives, which is on the edge of Rendlesham Forest.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, and also if you the other thing that of course comes up is government experiments. In any government, I would say, while I find that to be a very sad thing, I would think that taking two different species and joining them together for a lab experiment would be a very horrific thing, and people behind that have very horrific ideas in their heads. I don't think there's anything to be gained there, but of course that's if you want to call it evil human nature at its best.
Well, there's certainly echoes of that, strong echoes, troubling ones in the book Meet the Hybrids. Charmaine de Rosario Sage, who was also at the UFO Congress, and Vanessa and her were able to, get to know each other a little bit. When Charmaine told me, shared her story in interview with Barbara and I had a wave of anxiety like I've never experienced, certainly not in this research. I honestly was so freaked out by what she was telling me that I was really starting to wonder for a minute if I was actually going to be able to hang in there. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, she did a regression session with Barbara, and she sent me the transcript. And when I read the transcript, I was literally sat here chewing the back of my hand, reading it. It is by far the most disturbing material in the book, and there's actually I actually had to put a kind of a line cautioning the reader that caution, this chapter contains material that some may find disturbing, and I found it disturbing. She basically found herself. She was aware that she was having interactions with some of her hybrid children that themselves have ET fathers. And these interactions were taking place on underground bases in the United Kingdom, as far as she could make out. So she wanted to understand this and subvert any kind of memory erasure process that had taken place. So she did a regression with Barbara, and the full regression is in the book at the end of her chapter, and it describes her being taken from her home in the middle of the night, injected with something to basically paralyze her body, being sort of zipped in this kind of body bag thing and placed that was connected to a stretcher, taken by helicopter to an underground base. Then she was taken to a room where she was subjected to these frequencies that they were just coming out of speakers in the wall. And let me back up. When she was first unzipped from the bag, she was in a small room, and they attach some kind of injector to her, which has a couple of wires coming out the back of it, and a very cold fluid is pumped into her body, and then an electric current is basically run through this device and into her, and she started to feel a bit funky, and shall we say, and over the course of, I guess, the next minute or so, she was shifted into her reptilian form. Wow. Went through the full body shift, and that was the second time she'd been shifted. I mean, that story is also in there, but it was a completely different kind of experience. And there was a door that was open in the room. The guy who'd done all the injection left. So she went through this open door, down some stairs, into another room, and there's a kind of one-way, like a one-way mirror. And she started to feel these vibrations, these frequencies being emitted from the speakers, and she could see through the glass, even though it's supposed to be one way sort of thing. So it was starting to cause all kinds of pain, all kinds of discomfort, kind of torturing her in her reptilian form. And it occurred to her to basically absorb these frequencies and use them to, she would interact with them in a way that would allow her to basically use them to kind of project a shield outwards that would protect her. And she was able to expand that shield to hit the speakers, and this caused mayhem in the equipment that they had, and she has this whole description of what unfolds after that, with these people freaking out, trying to figure out what was going on. Meanwhile, she can see into the bodies of the people in that room and look at some of the health complaints and even understand the lifestyle choices that these people make that created the health problems that she could see, if you like, with her third eye. So in that form, there were all kinds of abilities available to her. And she basically left that room, went back out into the corridor, found herself exploring the base further while she's got all these people trying to... Okay, so they hadn't caught up to her at this point. And then she finds herself in a lab and freaks out the people in there. Of course, a couple of them bolt, a couple stay behind and are trying to obscure the work they're doing. And she finds ET tissue in some sort of container that they are studying and trying to add things to. So it was clear to her that all kinds of experimentation is being done with ET genetics. And in some way, that's just the start. And then there's, I mean, you have to read it, I guess. I mean, there's this whole other thing about the visitation she's had with her hybrid children and the abilities they have. And when you talk about black-eyed children, well, there's some kind of, maybe some connection with that. But yeah, her story is just wild.
Just like this whole subject, Miguel and Vanessa, it's just so expansive. We've got to wrap up. The couple hours went way too quick, and I would love to get you both back on again. I'm thinking here, if possible, down the road, maybe even a series with all of you, if that would be possible, because, again, people need to be educated about this. And the education, of course, to get out there to let people understand, to let people ask questions, and then people that are in the same, I don't want to say the same boat because that's not the right term, but people that have questions about their own history themselves, their own spirituality, everything tied around this. It just opens door after door. Miguel's book, co-authored with Barbara Lamb, is called Meet the Hybrids, The Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. Again, Miguel, where can our listeners get this book from?
Yeah, if they hit Amazon, whatever country they're in, they'll be able to get it, paperback or Kindle. It's on Barnes & Noble too. So, yeah, it's out there. And
Vanessa, your website is LaMorte.com. People need to go to your site and take a look at it. And as a little side note, Vanessa, I love UFOs, so if you want to tell your ET friends to send them over Salt Lake City and find me, that's just fine. I'm okay with that.
Right on.
It was an honor to do this interview with both of you and taking time today. And again, I would love to stay connected with you because I think we haven't even scratched the surface. And again, Miguel, my hat's off to you writing this book and delving into this subject. I can tell that it has changed your life just in your voice. And I hope we can get together again and continue on because, again, it's not only fascinating and interesting, but it's so eye-opening, and people need to know more and more about it.
Yeah, I look forward to it.